Louis, thank you so much for joining me today about this topic that a lot of couples are worried about, which is house hunting. You've been doing this for many years. This is actually your second time on the podcast, so welcome back. I love having you over in the first time. You've been a wealth of knowledge, and I can't wait to pick your brain with house hunting. The great thing about like living in Raleigh, and we were house hunting years ago, is there are many options. I mean, we have developments, even like across the street, new developments coming in, and then we have some fantastic neighborhoods with existing homes. I noticed when we were looking, there were some differences when we're house hunting. So I was wondering, could you go over for a couple that's looking like the pros and cons and what would be a good fit for them?
Well, in today's market, one of the biggest challenges that we have is the inventory of available homes. Whereas we may have in the Triangle area 15 to 20,000 properties available at any given time for sale. Today, we have just over 7,000. Yeah, that just gives you an idea of some of the challenges that we have in finding properties. And so what that's done, it is really incentivized builders to build very aggressively and broadly. So you have many large construction companies that are operating in the area, builders, regional builders, national builders that are just vying for any piece of land that they can find and trying to build homes just as fast as they can. In some markets where we historically have had new construction market penetration of maybe 15 to 20%, we now have 70% of available homes are new construction.
Wow.
So that puts a lot of pressure on buyers because obviously when you buy something that's new, you're going to pay a slight premium on that as opposed to buying something resale. And there's quite a few differences between new construction and resale homes when it comes to pricing, to character, to development of the property and the neighborhood in general. So there's definite considerations that any home buyer should make.
Yeah. I noticed when we were hunting, the first time we did a new build, it was a townhouse, and we had an HOA with that new development. The second time, we got an older home in an existing neighborhood with no HOAs. Have you noticed like in any trends in the Raleigh area with HOAs? To me, I mean, I'm just a regular person. Notice more and more in moving that direction.
Yeah, and so historically, HOAs will be enforced when a new development forms, and then they tend to expire after a period of time, and that tends to be 20 to 30 years unless they're renewed by covenants. Most every new development will have an HOA, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That really aids the neighborhood and its development and the culture that it forms, because you have all these different personalities and moving into the neighborhood, so it can go in any number of different directions. And so the covenants kind of put rails on it and kind of guide the development of the neighborhood. Listen, you can't change colors to this. There has to be uniformity in the structure. You can't park commercial cars in front of the house. So HOAs are not necessarily a bad thing. It can help the neighborhood develop to where it was intended to go. It can be problematic for some people, if they have a larger number of pets than is typical. I just met someone and they had 6 dogs, so that may not be permissible in most HOAs, but there are some areas that they can find a nice home.
That's a good point. Something to keep in mind, because I do know like there's some HOAs are very, I guess you could lax. Like you said, they just have the basic guardrails. They want to make sure the neighborhood is kept well, the maintenance taken care of, and then of course we hear it in the papers the nightmare HOAs with all of the rules and regulations. But when you're house hunting, you could request, like, say, if you're looking at that, to look at the HOA, I guess, guidelines for the neighborhood ahead of time? Okay.
Yeah, because those covenants are recorded at the inception of the neighborhood. They get recorded at the Register of Deeds. So anybody can go into the public records at the Register of Deeds of respective county and then do a search by the name of the HOA. And if you look at the name of the HOA, whether it's Wakefield Plantation or Briar Creek, search in there and you'll see the covenants come up, and then just read the covenants that apply to your particular property.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, always go in and get your research done. Now, I know a lot of us love watching HGTV and DIY Network, and we fall in love like this idea of getting a fixer-upper. We're told like, hey, if you can get this house and you can fix it up, you'll be saving money in the long run. This is a great thing. Real estate, you can snag deal. But then there's the other side of the coin where you have couples like us, not so handy, And so we're, I guess, more apprehensive about like, I don't want to get stuck with a money pit. So with
Right.
your experience, because you've have both sides, I mean, you do the real estate, but you've also fixed up, and you
Oh
have
yeah.
experience with construction and everything. What things should a couple look out for that are definitely like going to be expensive, fixes or improvements versus the more cosmetic that they can always outsource that or schedule that out later?
Okay, so in my experience,
Mhm.
everyone's maintenance issues is predicated upon your purchase decision. Um, you have to look past your first initial or your emotional response to the property because we're all visual, right?
Mhm.
And so people will walk into a property and they're basing their opinion, they're forming their opinion on the property based on what they see, but they're not really looking at the details behind the
Mhm.
property. So there are three key components to every home. There's the foundation and structure. You have the
Mhm.
mechanicals and plumbing, which is like your air conditioning system, your hot water heater, as well as the plumbing pipe itself. And then you have the surface finishes, which is what we're really responding to when we enter a home. We look at the wood floors, we look at the quality of the cabinets, the paint surfaces, etc. And I really
Mhm.
encourage buyers to take a closer look at the foundation and the structure, make sure that that is sound, and that'll be determined by any competent home inspector. I always recommend doing a home inspection, even in new construction homes. It's always the best way to do a
Mm.
home inspection. Absolutely. And then if you don't want to entrap yourself in a money pit, you want to make sure that the mechanical systems of the property have been updated. You want to make sure that the air conditioning is in good shape and in working order. And that is one key component that a lot of people allow their home inspector to test. I
Mhm.
always recommend to get an HVAC or air conditioning specialist to take a look at it because they, unlike a home inspector who's just going to measure the temperature of the air that's going into and out of the system, a
Mm.
specialist will actually just take off the cover, connect all the gauges, and make sure that it's functioning the way it was intended. That's where you really encounter the money pit situations where you
Mhm.
purchase a house because it looks cosmetically, it looks fantastic, but the underlying support systems are old and not functioning properly, and you're constantly putting money into them. And air conditioning in particular can be very expensive. I mean, your
Yeah.
typical HVAC service call is about $300. So you're not going to
Mhm.
get away from a cheap service call when it comes to HVAC problems. And you'll normally go through 3 or 4 of them before you decide ultimately to replace it. And so that's a sure way to avoid a money pit.
Our first time around, we made that mistake with the new build. We thought, well, it's brand new. We don't need to have a home inspector, right? Because the developer had offered a year after we move in, they'll fix up little things here and there. But I was surprised, even with a new build, there were certain things that weren't done correctly. Either they're rushing through it or someone just, they have contractors. So the quality can vary. So I would definitely vouch for that to get that inspected, even if it's a new build. Of course, we hear with house hunting, it's all about location, location, location. And it's tough. Like you mentioned, it is a different market here in Raleigh. It's a hot market. Buying, you're trying to find a good neighborhood, especially if you have kids, you're looking at the schools. But a lot of popular neighborhood with premium. Is there any way for a couple that's researching or trying to look for neighborhoods to kind of, do you have any tips on finding hidden gems?
The best thing that I can recommend to finding homes with good value in good neighborhoods is to look at a longer track record than what's trending today.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I've seen in my experience, and we're talking 20 years in the real estate business, is that neighborhoods and areas that everything operates on a cycle. So as an example, here in the Raleigh area, back in 2005, the Wakefield
Mm-hmm.
Plantation neighborhood was immensely popular. Everybody wanted to live in that neighborhood. Homes were selling for up to $200 a square foot. And today,
Yeah.
now we're almost 15 years removed from that, and we encounter people that aren't able to sell their homes because of the price that they paid moving into it. They
Mm-hmm.
actually bought at the peak of the market in a really trendy
Mm.
neighborhood, and so they paid a price. Now, obviously, there's value in use and value in trade, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they got a lot of enjoyment out of it. It was a great neighborhood, got some prestige and cachet out of it, but now value in trade is not as high as they'd want it to be. What I always recommend to people is pick an area that's convenient to you, that supports your particular lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
is close proximity to your work and to the places that you normally visit. And then don't buy the most expensive home in the neighborhood. Don't buy the prettiest home in the neighborhood. I always recommend look for the home that has that's not the shiny new coin in the neighborhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. We had a property that was on the market for some time, and nobody was interested in buying this property. This property was $145,000. And it was down in Clayton, so it was a good value. It was a ranch-style home, so all the bedrooms were on the ground floor. What I recommend for people is not to be attracted to the prettiest looking house in the neighborhood. You have a lot of investors that go into trendy neighborhoods, and they will do cosmetic updates. They'll replace kitchen cabinets. They'll refinish the floors. They give a nice paint job. It looks really beautiful, but the underlying portions of the house, the foundation, the plumbing system, the mechanicals are not in the best condition. And so people are paying, a premium because it looks great, but over time it creates maintenance problems for them. And they're really not going to derive as much benefit for them, because when they go to resale, it's not going to be looking like that, because they're not going to spend the money updating it. And so you pay a premium for looking great, but then when it comes to resale, the price is going to drop a little bit because now it's more used, right? The same thing happens with new construction properties. A lot of people think that they'll buy a brand new home and then maybe in 3 to 5 years they'll sell it and move somewhere else. Well, in reality, new construction, there is a very large premium between new construction and resale properties, and that could be as high as 20%. And so what happens is within the first 3 years, at least in most areas, your property is actually declined in value from what you paid for it. And you have to wait until the resale market comes up as it appreciates and reaches your price point, your entry point in that new construction home. And then it'll continue appreciating along with the rest of the market. Because the day after you move into a brand new home, now you're in a resale property. Because you're the only people that can sell new construction are builders, and that's it. No matter what you do to it. Even if you completely renovate your home, you're still compared to the resale market. And that market is selling at a slight discount from new construction. So, I worked with a lot of buyers that we would go look at houses, and they would simply fall in love with the houses that investors, the savvy investors, have just cleaned them up, made them look nice and shiny, and they're willing to pay top dollar for those. But if they look past that, look at their house in the same neighborhood that maybe hasn't been updated, the structure is the same as the shiny new one, but maybe the flooring has to be replaced or the paint needs to be redone, you could save a considerable amount of money in that. In my 20 years, or actually now 30 years of home ownership, I have never bought the prettiest or nicest home in the neighborhood. I will look for a quality neighborhood, and I'll buy the ugliest property that I can find in that neighborhood that suits my lifestyle. And then we'll go ahead and fix it up, and you can recover so much wealth that way, just by minor updating and just improving the presentation of the property.
I will say we got smarter the second time around, and that's what we did. It was dated, but it was solidly built, a little ranch home. And another good thing is it gives you flexibility. If the mechanical, the structural things are fine, these updates you can get a good discount, versus having it all put into the mortgage and you're locked in until you sell it. So these are some fantastic tips, Louis. I know we have some listeners that are in the area, the Triangle area. They're looking to buy a home. They're looking to sell a home. Could you tell them how they can reach out and maybe work with your team over at Daymark?
Yeah, absolutely. So Daymark Realty is entirely owned by Coastal Credit Union. We're the largest private credit union in the Triangle area, and our number is 919-882-6700. And you can also find us at coastal24.com or daymarkrealty.com.
Perfect. So I'm definitely going to put all of this in the show notes. And guys, for you listening, we used Daymark when we were buying this property. We were so happy with the service that we got. So thank you so much, Louis, for coming on. I look forward to chatting with you again. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ellie. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you again.